I think crypto media, do I want to make that broad statement? Who knows? But I will, and then I can just back.
Hey everyone, I'm Amy James, the co-inventor of Open Index Protocol, and welcome back to the What Kind of Internet Do You Want series. On today's episode, I'm interviewing Bailey Reutzel. Bailey is a journalist who has worked for large corporations like American Banker and CoinDesk, but she's also worked for many years as a freelance journalist and has done some fascinating passion projects like her money tripping road trip blog and a series on the Mongol rally from her sofa. We'll link them in the description below for you to check out. I was really excited to talk with Bailey because as a content creator and journalist, she gravitates toward things at the edge, the places where new, weird, exciting stuff happens, and I have an affinity for stuff at the edge as well. In a way, it was this inclination toward things on the edge that brought us both into crypto. In this episode, we talk about how creators are pinched between the models of working for big corporations or doing the freelance hustle, and how the incentive models of each are skewing the content and the quality of journalism. Bailey and I have both been in crypto since the early teens, so it was really fun to reminisce on how far it's come and to imagine where we might go next. Bailey has cut her own path as a journalist and creator and has good practical advice about how someone else can make their own way too. It turns out that basics like showing up and working hard and investing in opportunities still works even in the cutting edge, crazy world of crypto. We went pretty deep into content distribution incentive models and the problems that they cause. It was a good chat. Bailey is very insightful. If you enjoy this episode, please smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. You can find Bailey on Twitter at BLR13 or on Instagram at Blurred World, and say hi to me on Twitter or Instagram at Amy of Alexandria. Enjoy the conversation. I know I did. I'm stoked today to have with me Bailey Reutzel. Happy to have you here, Bailey.
I'm so glad to be a part of this. Thanks so much, Amy.
You're one of the people that I've known the longest in crypto, actually. Like, you probably don't even remember this. I thought it would be fun to start by kind of like telling tales about myself. When we first got started, this was like 2014, you went to a conference in New York that Devin was also at. And so you guys met there, and he got your card, and I sent you the very first press release that we ever sent out about our work. And I look back on it now and I just laugh. It's so embarrassing. And I'm sure that you don't remember it. And I have never told you in all of these years that we've known each other since, because it's like one of those just, but it's also funny because we're now, like, some of the work that we were talking about all the way back then, we've now completed and we're seeing come to fruition. So it's wild, you know, how you're like, we were insane, but we also knew what we were doing. I don't know.
Right. What email did you send that to? Now I want to go look it back up.
I know. I almost pulled it up for this interview, but I just didn't. I think you were at American Banker then, right?
Okay, so maybe like a payment source one, because I was
that's it. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
yeah,
right.
I was focused on the payments tech subsidiary. So that's sort of how, I was able to write about Bitcoin there, but that's really funny. But also it's like humbling, and I'm glad that you still remember that as well. Cause like throughout the crypto space, it's just grown and changed into so many things. And me and some of the like old school New York Bitcoiners sometimes talk about this. It's like, people have forgotten us and that hurts sometimes. So I'm glad you haven't.
Well, yeah, that's why I was so excited to talk to you for the series, because you have had the career of the kind of person that was like my personal motivation for wanting to do the work that we do, because I had a background as a creator. I worked as a director and writer and stuff like that. And so I could see the various ways that the system was broken, and I didn't know how to chart my own course. And so I just thought, even though technology is not my jam, like in a just like nerd out way that the other nerds nerd out about technology, I would just like take one for the team of artists to really push for this, because somebody has to, you know, the system is so broken. And that's really what I wanted to talk with you about today, because you have experience on both sides. So do you want to tell us just kind of like a little bit of your background? Because I know like you worked at American Banker and you've worked for CoinDesk and you've worked in those kind of places, but you've also done some really cool freelance work on your own, like your money tripping series. And I was watching stuff about you to get ready for our conversation today, and you did this Mongol rally thing from your couch. That was cool. So you just have these like unusual interests as a freelancer that I think make you a really interesting, creator.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you. That was great. Yeah. So my career sort of started as a financial journalist. I was covering credit unions initially. So I went to school in Missouri, and then only because I wanted to get out of Missouri and sort of see new places did I take sort of the first job offered to me, which happened to be writing about credit unions in Washington, D.C. I did not care at all about credit unions. I probably didn't even know what they were at the time, but I got hired on to do this. And then pretty shortly after that, I started writing about payments tech for that pub. And then 6 months later, I was in New York with Payment Source. So just sort of right place, right time, I think, as well. It's still, my editor over there, Daniel Wolf, was really amazing. He is really amazing. He's still over there, but I guess he saw something in me, because I honestly feel like I didn't really know much about what I was getting into. So that was a really great chance that he took. And then so around that, I think that was late 2012, around that time, I stumbled upon an article, I think it was in Gawker maybe, about the Silk Road. And I'm just sort of interested in weird internet subcultures. And so read that piece, and obviously like Silk Road was the main appeal there, because that's like a weird internet subculture. But then there was also this other thing, this Bitcoin thing that you had to use to pay there. So that's how I first sort of got introduced to Bitcoin.
And it like connected with your payment
exactly
thing that you had just been learning about at the same time. Oh my gosh, wow, that's so cool.
Exactly. And it just so happened that when I moved to Payment Source, which is just the subsidiary, payments tech subsidiary of American Banker, the editor over at American Banker at the time was a guy named Mark Hochstein, who's now the editor over at CoinDesk.
Yeah.
And Mark Hochstein was also a big Bitcoin proponent. And so once he understood that I was a Bitcoin proponent and I understood that he was, we sort of like teamed up in a certain way where we're like, oh yeah, see, we can write about this now. But that was, I think early 2013. So the price was, I think when I got in, the price was like, between $10 and $20 a coin. Nobody cared about it like at all.
Yeah, I know. There was so much resistance in those early times. And especially if you were at all interested in something other than Bitcoin. And,
yes, right.
And you have been more open-minded to, altcoins since I've known you, since the very beginning.
Right.
So that was really an interesting time to be a part of the community, for sure.
Absolutely. And it was so exciting, because we did feel like, sort of the edgy rebels, like we had a cause and we were trying to get this thing through and make people understand us and also take us seriously. So that was like a very fun time, and I think that's also why I've continued to be pretty open-minded in terms of altcoins and then, DeFi and NFTs. Maybe it's for my own selfish reasons, but, those are the edgy protocols now. Like Bitcoin is functioning and doing really well, and I will always love Bitcoin. I've got a Bitcoin tattoo, for God's sake, but like, I want to be in these edgy parts of the community as well. These people who are just doing so many creative, interesting things. Not all of it will work, but some of it will. And so that's what I'm super interested in.
Actually, I think that you just put your finger on what it is that I love about you so much, which is that you really do like to be out on the edge, and I do too. Totally. Yeah. It's where the exciting, fun stuff happens. Exactly. So you can just see that throughout your career. And I think that being bold the way that you have been in order to be able to explore those edgy things that naturally grab a hold of you, but then also build up your legitimacy and your network and your reputation. You've really done a great job of threading that needle. And I think that it's a hard nut to crack, to mix my analogies there, but or whatever those sayings are. But I think that it's a hard thing to figure out when you have that kind of personality where you want to explore unusual things and you like being on the edge, but you also, want to be able to consistently make rent and
right. That's an important thing too.
Yeah.
I mean, look, thank you very much for saying there's a through line. It's as a person myself in my life, it's harder for me to see that, or I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing, just like everybody else doesn't know what they're doing. So thank you. I'm glad that I'm outside.
Well, I wondered if it was, I wondered if it was like more conscious, or if it was just kind of like, rolling with it, or like how you sustain that, how you manage to make those decisions and deal with the stress, I think, that is inherent in living in that space.
Yeah. What is like a good answer? It's just like, you just keep going and going. I mean, I love what I do. I love creating content, and also I really enjoy crypto. And so, it just makes me want to work a lot sometimes. So sometimes I have to work a lot. Sometimes now I get to sort of take off a little bit, which is great. But especially back in those early days, I was constantly at the meetups, and I was constantly at the conferences. And even if like payment source didn't want to pay for those trips, I'd be like, oh, that's okay, I'm just going to go on my own dime, because I was so fascinated with it that I would take those chances to do that. And I think it served me really well. Sometimes you sort of have to put in some capital to hopefully get capital later, or maybe take a break later. So but I mean, I always tell people, look, I was very lucky to have the career in crypto, because it was just right place, right time. I didn't have any other information, just like anybody else. And I wasn't a programmer. So I didn't know that it was going to go anywhere. You know what I mean? And so it just so happened that I joined Payment Source, and Mark Hochstein was there. And we sort of were able to build up a crypto beat at this trade pub. And then from there, like sort of the rest is history, and so, yeah, but it was luck of the draw,
That's awesome. That's super inspiring, honestly, because it sounds like one of the strategies that you've used over and over is showing up and working hard. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. To hear that works out.
It does, right? I don't, like, it doesn't always work out.
Right.
So I want to,
but even like investing in yourself, in the way that you're talking about, where you would like go and do things anyway, just for the knowledge, I think it's that mindset that is what has made you be able to chart this course that you've charted. So I might have gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves. Why don't you kind of like take people through that a little bit more? Like, you've worked for the larger institutions, but also you've done this freelance work as well, and kind of like talk about that a little bit, and then talk about also the problems that you've seen on both sides. So that, yeah,
sure. So I'll try to go through this fast. I mean, I've worked through just like a ton of people at this point, so it kind of gets long-winded, but I'll try to make that as short as possible. So yeah, after Payment Source, I went out on my own as a freelancer, and was, again, just because I was one of the first reporters in crypto, it was pretty easy to get those crypto jobs, right? And so mostly I was pitching still to Payment Source and American Banker, and then also to CoinDesk. So I had just happened to run into the editor at the time, Pete Rizzo, in New York, right before I went on this big road trip, which I'll talk about later. But so I had this connection with CoinDesk, and he was like, hey, funny enough, saw your name on this Wikipedia page for some Bitcoin article, so I know who you are, and yeah, you should write for CoinDesk. So sort of started out there. When I left Payment Source, I went on to do a 6-month road trip that I called money tripping. So I spent about 3 to 4 days per state. And the initial idea was to cover like what people think about money. So what they thought it was. I had just come out of London and they were having these big philosophical conversations about like, where did money come from? Was it really out of barter, or was it from like kings and priests and stuff like that? Very fascinated with that.
Yeah.
And so I sort of went on the road trip thinking that that's the question that I would ask. Very quickly, it became clear that I couldn't really ask that question in the US. Like the US was just not thinking about money in that way, which is not to say that they're dumb. I don't want it to seem like that. It's just not really a question we were, it's not a discussion people in the US were really having at the time. But I still wanted to focus on money. So I sort of branched out to like, what are your thoughts about money? How do you interact with money at your job, in your life, yada, yada, yada. Some of that crossed over into the Bitcoin space. And then that also happened to be in the run up to the first, or to the Trump election in 2015. And so it became political very fast.
I bet.
And yeah, so did that project, 6-month project, had a pretty successful blog out of it. There are things I would have done differently because I didn't keep that momentum going. I sort of, as soon as I was done with the road trip, I was just like, all right, maybe I'll write a book out of it. But, it was a complex thing that I was trying to write. And so I sort of just turned the blog off. And so didn't keep that momentum going. But
so did the blog, was it ever a source of revenue for you?
It was. Revenue is maybe an overstatement. I did make money. So I did several freelance projects while I was on that trip. So I went to Money 2020 when I was on that trip and did some freelance work for Payment Source. And then also people would tip me. So they tip me in Bitcoin and with PayPal sometimes. So I did get Bitcoin out of that, but it wasn't like it covered.
Yeah. And
so
your blog wasn't earning like a bunch of money through advertising or something like that.
No, nothing like that. Yeah. So I ended up, I think that trip cost me 6 months on the road. I think it was like $13,000 it costs altogether. And
You're amazing.
I probably made like 2,000 or 3,000 during that trip. So I came back from that trip. I just drove into my parents' driveway in Missouri, is where I'm from, and I had like $200 to my name. And that was, again, one of those things that I wanted to do that trip. And so I decided I would just spend the money to do it and hopefully something would come out of it. And then like crypto side note, I had bought Ethereum in the crowd sale. And so when I got back home and I had very little money, I opened up that wallet again. And it had, $3,000 in it. So I was all, wonderful, I'm going to sell now. That was ETH at $7 a coin. And so I sold all my ETH then so that I could continue my life without being very broke. But now I regret that decision.
Of course. Oh man. Everyone I know has one of those stories.
Yeah.
So, yes. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, those were the times, you had to eat then, and that's what it was. It's hard to think about though. But I also just want to say again that that's what I have admired about watching your career is the guts that it's taken to follow your interests that way and just like trust that something will work out. And even though like maybe exactly the thing that you were hoping would work out isn't what came out of money tripping, something good did, right?
Yeah.
And
right.
what was that? Was that going to CoinDesk next?
Well, it's just a project that I wanted to do. And I think I learned that didn't necessarily lead to CoinDesk, right?
Okay.
But obviously, people saw that blog and I think, they would say the same things. Like, that was very gutsy. That was a very cool project that you did. And so it obviously just sort of showed that I could do those things, I think. And the editor at CoinDesk at the time, we were good friends at the time, and he was sort of working with me on money tripping as well. And so, he loved the project. And after that project ended, I moved to Colorado and then freelance there for about a year before he hired me on to be an editor at CoinDesk. And so that's when I moved back to New York.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So what did you do for that year? You freelanced in Colorado?
I did, yeah. I mean, my rent, I was in Colorado Springs and I was living with this friend of mine, and my rent was like, I don't know, $200, $300 per month. And you can make, this is one of the things like, well, I'm sure we'll talk about, but in crypto media, you can make you can make a good amount of money. It's, the salaries or what you can get freelance wise are maybe a bit higher than what you would get in traditional media. And so I would work, I don't know, once or twice a month on a story. And the rest of the time I would hike and rock climb. And I was living the dream, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds pretty great.
Yeah.
So talk about that. Why do you think that you can make more in crypto media than you can in other places right now? It's just frothier.
Yeah, I think just frothier. I mean, when you have an uptrend like you see in Bitcoin and some of the other cryptocurrencies, there's just, there's money to be had. So I don't want to use CoinDesk specifically, but in any crypto media, if the people who can sponsor or who can give you advertisements or who can sponsor your conferences or whatever, if they are holding a bunch of Bitcoin and it goes up 100x, they've got money to spend, and they're like willing to spend it. And so if they spend money at your publication, that publication, they're going to hire more reporters. They're going to hire reporters for a higher salary because they're trying to steal them away from the other places they could go. And so, yeah, you can just, you can make better money in crypto media than I've seen in other traditional media.
And is it the same type of work essentially? It's just the topic is different, or is there other things about the space that are different?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same type of work. I think crypto media, do I want to make that broad statement? Who knows? But I will, and then I can just so I think crypto media has been quite good at pivoting very quickly and seeing that that sort of the social media space is something that you really need to take seriously. So that's where a lot of the conversations were happening. And so in crypto media, we were just on it all the time. One of the things that I think CoinDesk did very well, and some other pubs do very well, but if we wanted to write about something, or if one of my reporters wanted to write about something that was maybe not super trendy at the time, so I don't know, some small update in Bitcoin's core protocol or something. And we knew that that wasn't going to get a huge amount of page views. What we would try to do is sort of look at the discussions that were happening on social media, those things that were very trendy, and figure out a way to weave that narrative into this broader topic. And in that way, hopefully pull people into the story to read about this thing that we thought they needed to read about, right? To stay informed and educated. And so, I think CoinDesk did that very well. It's probably still doing that very well. But yeah, so I guess I think that crypto media was just maybe like a little bit faster to acknowledge that than some of the traditional medias. But again, I haven't really worked in a lot of traditional media, so it's like sort of hard for me to tell.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially because the crypto space is still pretty small and it moves so fast. It makes a lot of sense that the media would naturally just to keep up in a way, and that would be like a cool part of being able to work in that space.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, it's just, I mean, the amounts, you're usually really strapped for people, or at least we were at that time. I think I joined CoinDesk full time, 2017, 2016, 2017, maybe. And, I think it was like the 5th or 6th person on the editorial side. And she's like, totally strapped for people. The space was booming at points, and then it would sort of fall at other points. But, we were working all of the time, very fast amounts of work. And like, I know that one of the things that happened at CoinDesk, which some people love and some people don't, and I don't know if traditional media does this, I had never had this happen before, but like something would break and a reporter would be covering it, and then they would just share me to the doc, and there could be like 3 or 4 of us working in the same doc at the same time. Which is hectic, but it got things done. There'd be somebody sort of like, okay, I've got an idea for the intro. Can somebody else sort of write the meat of this, and somebody else write the real techie part?
Wow, that's wild. That's
yeah.
so wild. I've never written on a document with other people at the same exact time.
Yeah.
That's so wild. But I mean, there's the amount of inbound you guys must have been fielding was probably just insane. So that totally makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so you were at CoinDesk and now you're not at CoinDesk again, right? Or you are? I'm not even sure at this point.
I honestly am not even sure where I am.
Yeah. I mean, so for everybody watching, we just last week, 2 weeks ago, did the we're presented at Consensus with Bailey. Bailey invited us to present as part of her tracks. And it was super fun. The panel was amazing. The whole virtual experience was wild. Thank you for inviting us for that. So so I still like have you at CoinDesk in my mind from having worked with you to put that presentation together. But you aren't, it didn't say that you were in your Chiron when we were actually presenting.
Oh, did it not?
I said you were a freelancer or something like that.
Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah.
So I guess about 2 years ago, so at some point I left CoinDesk. And again, I didn't really have a plan. I just was getting a bit burnt out because of the thing that I just explained, that it was very fast paced and we were all sort of working on top of each other all the time. But so I quit CoinDesk, and then, relatively shortly after, I was just sort of bouncing around and not doing much and trying to figure it out. But pretty shortly after that, I met up with Ian Wong in London. So he ran Court's crypto newsletter. He's also old school CoinDesker, writer and editor. And then he was at the time managing Consensus for CoinDesk. And so we met up and he was like, look, I'm looking for somebody who really knows the space very well and who wants to teach people crypto. And that is sort of exactly what I was looking to do at the time. So I wanted to pull back from the day-to-day news cycle. And I wanted to focus on onboarding more people to the huge amount of crypto that was now available to them. So it wasn't just Bitcoin anymore. And I was sort of struggling to keep up with some of it as well. So it's like, we wanted to build out these interactive experiences that got Consensus attendees like hands-on with the tech.
So is that when you did Bitcoin at 10?
So Bitcoin at 10, no, that isn't.
Okay.
You're like reminding me of all the things that I've done. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Bitcoin at 10 was right before I left CoinDesk full time. So I'd sort of moved into a multimedia role where I was doing some video and audio for CoinDesk as well, right before I left. And so did that project, left, and then came on for Consensus. And so have just been contracting for CoinDesk in this capacity where I sort of help them build out Consensus and some of the other events that they have. And with that focus on, those are called unlock sessions. And they're just sort of interactive explainers where usually there's some kind of airdrop or some way to get people hands-on with the tech. So like this latest, I'll just give you one example from this latest Consensus. And you guys also did it, but we did an NFT 101 session, and there's a company called POAP. So I think this proof of active attendance or proof of attendance protocol. And what they do is they offer NFT badges that you can claim to, basically as a collectible for being a part of an event. So they can either be your way to verify that you should be able to come into the event, or they can sort of be this collectible on the other end. And those claims are, they ride on XDAI. So there's not a huge amount of barriers to entry there. You can put your email address in to get them. You can put your Ethereum address in to get them, or like your ENS name. And then you have this NFT. And so that's a way to actually see that technology at work, if that makes sense.
Totally, yeah.
And so that's the kind of stuff that I build with CoinDesk now.
Okay, cool. I love those hands-on experiences. I watched a couple of your sessions from the event, and I learned about Lolly, which I had heard of because I enjoy their meme roundup on Instagram every week, but I didn't know what they did, because usually when I see free Bitcoin, I kind of turn off.
Okay. Yeah.
But what they do is really cool. So yeah, I think it's really cool that you have this like focus on bringing people in. I don't always have enough patience to kind of talk about the same things over and over or something like that, in that way. But that's really cool.
Well, I think it was, look, Bitcoin was a tough thing for me to learn back in 2012. I mean, like I said, I am not a programmer. I am not super techie. I mean, I'm like pretty techie, but I wasn't, I don't know. I wasn't like playing with my computer, like building computers from scratch or anything.
Right.
So this was pretty challenging. And one of the reasons that I wanted to build something like this was that people gave me the opportunity to play around with the tech to show its power. So like Mark Hochstein gave me, I think he honestly gave me a whole Bitcoin at one time. So God bless that man, but I don't have it anymore. But yeah, and that's when you really start to see the power, is when you get to play with it. I also think that, like, not to sort of belabor this point, I guess, but a lot of people in crypto sort of know how to talk the talk on these things. And I am, I know how to talk the talk, but until recently, I hadn't really played around in DeFi. And so when you start experimenting with the tech, it becomes clear that sort of the talk that's talked is not quite as nuanced as maybe it should be, or you just sort of lose stuff. And so until you actually get in there and play with the tech, I don't think you fully understand it. And so that's sort of my goal, is to make sure people understand it by using it.
That makes sense. I mean, it's just so true. It's like, think about what it must have been like to try to explain the internet or the web to somebody before you used it. It's what we sound like, I think, trying to explain Bitcoin to people sometimes. Right. It's just like total like just buzzword salad of like nonsense almost, right. Where if you don't know what you're talking about, it doesn't make sense. And so grounding that in reality is how things will actually change.
Yeah. And I think, look, I think we've seen over the past, maybe shorter than a decade, but let's say the past decade, that it's really helpful to understand those things at that level. So I think our society has been abstracting things away from us for a while. So like, just, you could say the grocery store is an abstraction of how you get food, right? And like Facebook is an abstraction about how you connect with people on the internet. And then as we saw, I'll just use Facebook as an example, but you can pick any one of these companies really, as you saw them sort of exploit the information that they were able to sort of hoover up from us, and then use, sometimes not in a way that we would like them to use. You started seeing people be like, oh shit, I do need to understand what these companies are doing before I start participating in them. And so I want to make sure that crypto is that way. Even if it's hard, you still want to understand these like base layer things so you can make the right choices with what you want to invest in or what you want to play with, yada, yada.
I love that. That's awesome. In the early 90s, the AOL had its own when you got on the internet, you got into AOL's internet. You didn't get onto the web. It wasn't until, I don't remember the year off the top of my head right now, but I've seen the press release when they like announced that they were adding access to the web as a feature on AOL, because people were starting to understand that they were inside a walled garden and there was this other thing. And so they kind of had to add it. But it's that's kind of where we are in a way in terms of crypto, of like new people are wanting to engage with it, and they really need to engage in certain ways to have a good experience and avoid things that would potentially burn them. And finding that information in this landscape, you are the kind of people that we absolutely need, putting that message out there and helping people find that information. So,
well, yeah, thanks again. I feel very flattered by this conversation that we're having.
Well, good. I'm glad. I didn't plan for that, but I mean it. So, so now you're kind of freelancing. Are you also freelancing, or are you doing other kind of creative work in addition to your consensus work?
Yeah, so I'm just a freelancer contractor, but so I'm still at CoinDesk they decided to keep me on, which is great. Thanks so much, CoinDesk, for doing that. But just because the unlock sessions are really going over very well. So not only it's been really exciting for me to, this is only a 2-year-old project. So I built that out in 2020, first at 2020's consensus.
Wow.
Where
when everything was, you had to also switch from real life to virtual, right? For that one? Yeah.
In a month. Yeah. It was
in a month. That must have been fun. Yeah.
So it's been really exciting to see that not only is that what I want to do in crypto, but that so many people need that in crypto. So like, for instance, this year, last year, it also got a really good turnout, but this year we had an Unlocked 101 set series that happened ahead of consensus, and that had 10,000 people register. And those are, not all 10,000 came live. Hopefully all 10,000 watched it afterwards, but maybe they didn't, and that's fine. People will register for free events and then not come. That's the nature of the beast. But
sure.
Those are exciting numbers, right? Those are big numbers. We had like the average view time was like 42 minutes on these sessions, which is just unheard of for like video on the internet. So it's been really exciting for me to see that. And I was really excited for CoinDesk to be like, hey, we want to re-up your contract to do more of this, because, what I wanted to do has come to fruition. And it's like, oh, people want what I'm willing to give them. So that's really great.
Yeah, that's really great. That must be really gratifying. And like it feels good to get that kind of thing. But I would like to talk a little bit about money too, if you're okay with that, since money is, but like the mechanics of being paid as a journalist. So like CoinDesk makes revenue by selling ads and having sponsors and people buying tickets. And they have a bunch of revenue streams that I think most of us can imagine that are just like the very basic revenue streams. And then they pay you, right?
Yeah.
And then, but if you were to go onto like Substack or Patreon, you would need to pull all of your popularity with you, pull all those people with you so that you could get paid that way. Right. And I guess I would see that as like the two basic models right now. Would you agree? Or are there other ones that I'm not thinking of for somebody that wants to do your kind of job? Like either work for a company where the company is, managing all of and then they're just being paid, or go it alone and rely on their own popularity.
Yeah, I think those are the two models. There's probably some sketchy models that are also in there, but we don't need to like talk about those necessarily.
Good call. There's probably not just the two. But those are the basic ones, right? Yeah. And so I think that there's like you've found this like kind of like sweet spot after all of these years of like working various ways to make it work for you, where you can do something that you find satisfying, the work, and like find valuable, and even isn't like necessarily the grind of a full-time, not even 9 to 5 really, right? Like just that kind of intense. But I guess I just wanted to get more of your thoughts on like the issues involved in like each of these two things. You wrote me, I actually pulled this quote that you wrote when we were getting ready for this conversation. You said that, as a freelancer for many years, it's great, but that's only because most full-time jobs and most companies that offer you full-time jobs are broken and terrible inside. And that it's not, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but it's not that young people like want to live this gig lifestyle that we're living, and working like a million jobs and hustling and freelancing and all of that kind of stuff. But we also don't want to sell our soul to what did you call it? A monolithic where did it go? Monolithic, inflexible company that doesn't have your back at the end of the day. But at the same time, you'd enjoy having healthcare and like a vacation, right? So I was just hoping you could talk more about that, like the benefits and the problems that you see on both of those models, and head that toward what you think crypto might change about that, if anything.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yes. And so, yeah, how do I want to start that? Wow, that was quite the quote to read. Like, maybe like, fuck this brand. Yeah.
Yeah, I took out a few of the F-bombs for you.
I guess I will start by saying, like, to be fair, the companies that I have worked for have not been super terrible.
That's
So
awesome.
I haven't really, I hear other people's sort of strife in this scenario. I think you're always going to have a bit of strife in a startup that's moving to a bigger company. So there's
Absolutely.
always going to be that, because you're hiring a bunch of new people. All those new people, have ideas about what they want from the company. And so if you don't have, I guess it's just, yeah, you have people who were originally at the company, and then you have the new people. They sometimes have different ideas about where they want the company to head. And obviously heads do collide in that moment. But I guess sort of, so saying that, tempering that with the companies that I have worked for have been, pretty great, really. But so let's talk sort of about the pros and cons that I see. And again, broadly, not speaking about anyone in particular.
Yeah.
So I guess, like, speaking about, let's speak about the freelance model first, just because I think that that's maybe easier. So a freelance model, you have all of the freedom that you want, and you sort of get to pick and choose what you're doing, except, you have to make rent. So sometimes you have to do things you don't want because,
You need the
nobody
paycheck.
wants what you want.
Right.
So yeah, it is quite a hustle to be a freelancer. You are, you're pitching all the time. I've sort of found myself in this nice space where the freelance that I do now is not one-off stories anymore. It's like building out these experiences. So I get contracts for a longer portion of time, whereas some freelance writers, they're just getting paid, let's say $1,000, and that's like crypto media standard payment.
For an article or
for an
something.
article, right?
Okay.
And it goes as low as, like, people have asked me if I will write a story for $50, and they can find people to do that. They're not finding, obviously, people, maybe the best people. And I don't mean that really mean. I just mean, you can get people right out of college who don't know much about the space, who probably aren't going to be as nuanced in their reporting.
Totally.
And you pay them that kind of money, and sort of, I would encourage everybody not to take that kind of money for stories, just so we can get rid of that model. But yeah, it can go pretty low. And obviously, people need to hustle a lot when they're getting paid that little.
And so in order to get those kind of gigs, you would pitch the outlet that you want to write something, and then they would say, okay, we'll pay you to write that.
Yes.
Basically. Yeah. So you also have to do all of the work of getting the job in the first place. Like, there's not somebody feeding that to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so sometimes there are, like, at CoinDesk, when I was freelancing for CoinDesk before I started there full time, like, some Pete or one of the editors would come to me and be like, hey, we need somebody to write this story. Do you want to write it? And I could say yes, but that's because I already had that relationship with them. So once you get a relationship with a publication, yeah, sure, they might farm out some stuff to you that they want. But if you don't, you're sort of just cold pitching places. You're just sending it to an email inbox that maybe doesn't get checked. And I had to do this as well at CoinDesk when I started there full time. We had a freelancer funnel, and, some days I didn't have time to go through the freelancer funnel. And so those stories just kind of got, thrown away. And so managing a freelancer group is a whole job in of itself, especially because if those people aren't, they're not super connected into crypto every day, like the reporters, the full-time reporters are, there's going to be some editing work that needs to be done there. So yeah, but that's the normal process. You would sort of pitch a publication, and they would accept it and say, here's what we're willing to pay for that. And, then you go out and do all your research and all your interviews, and then you write the story, and then you turn it in, and then you get paid. So that's sort of that model. And again, some of those prices are pretty low. I don't know that I can honestly quote prices for print stuff now just because I haven't done it in so long. I try to get $1 per word. That came out of American Banker. They would pay me $1 per word, but again, they're a big trade pub, so they can probably afford it. I know, Vice is maybe $200, $300. Maybe that's gone up. I haven't looked at that in a while. But the financial services publications will probably pay a bit higher, again, because, they're in financial services. The people that they're writing for also make a lot of money, and so also give them a lot of money. But arts and entertainment writing, you're going to get probably nothing for doing stuff like that.
Wow. Interesting. I mean, it makes sense, totally makes sense, but I hadn't thought about even inside of journalism, how there's going to be beats you can write about where there's just naturally more money to be made. That's really interesting.
Right.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. Yeah. So there's just the freelance hustle where you're writing for contracts. So I guess that is kind of a different model than we were even talking about, because that's not necessarily writing based on your popularity. That's just writing for publications.
Yes. Fair enough. Yeah. So I guess I have not really, so I guess with Money Tripping and then the other project, which you mentioned earlier, which was the Couched Mongol Rally project, I was writing for myself, or the Couched Mongol Rally was more of a video. So I was on YouTube, but I wasn't getting paid for any of those things. So what I found is that distribution channel is really important, and it's not something that I've learned how to build. And I honestly don't know that I want to be the person to build that for myself, because it does mean that you're having to do a huge amount of marketing work on yourself all the time. So if I created a Substack, I don't know, maybe this would be a good experiment for me, is creating a Substack and seeing how many people with limited amounts of marketing I could get to buy that Substack or to subscribe to that Substack. And then sort of tweaking that model. Okay, if I tweet about it once a week, how does that change things? If I tweet about it 8 times a day, how does that change it? But that's it's a big process to market yourself. And I used to be a lot better at it than I guess I could be better at it, but I don't want to be on social media very much anymore. And so
I'm sorry. I just completely empathize with this, because I'm starting the show up again. And so we're starting to, talk about posting it on social media and stuff like that, because when we first did it, we just made them and released them, and we didn't really do much to promote them. And now we're like, oh, well, we really, if we're going to go to all of this effort to make this content, we really should try to make sure that people see it. And it is I think it takes a certain type of personality to naturally want to do that kind of work, which I think I'm not like that naturally. And so I totally get that. It's just this thing that you have to do. And I mean, all jobs have some suck. So, I guess you just kind of have to choose if it's something that you're willing to tolerate or not. But I think that it is a really hard part of this particular problem that we're talking about.
Absolutely. Right. Because so I guess there's a few things I would say there. I mean, it's a tragedy, because that does push people to create content that is not very good. So that pushes people to create clickbait, and only clickbait, not clickbait where there's some nugget of goodness somewhere inside there that they just wanted you to click on and then you could get to, but just straight trash reporting. And also very fast reporting. If you have to do something very quickly, you're not getting all the nuances. And so it sort of pushes people.
And forced controversies kind of, I mean, where it doesn't, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that is a tragedy in and of itself. I mean, secondly, not only, I guess not only do we have to sort of pander to an audience that is using social media to escape from reality in many ways. And I'm not making a judgment call there necessarily, but they aren't necessarily doing the doom scrolling to get nuanced news. But that is where most people are then taking in some kind of news. Mm-hmm. And so it's if they're only reading the headline, you start seeing these publications that will only post headlines. Mm-hmm. And that feels really nerve-wracking to me, because that means that everything, the headlines that you click on are the controversial ones. That means you have to manufacture controversy. And that means this whole split between these different camps of people, be it Republicans or Democrats, or, be it like God-fearing people versus not, just means that they're butting heads more because they are only reading a headline and they're not getting sort of the full nuanced story. But separately from that huge disaster is we don't know how the algorithms work either. So I can't tell what content, I can sort of understand what content is going to go well on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, right? I sort of understand that, but not deep enough. I mean, this is like a full-time job for some people as well, is trying to figure out the algorithms so that they can pump their stuff. That's not a job I'm going to do. And so I don't really fully understand like how to get my stuff in front of a bunch of people.
Yeah.
I mean, I could rant about the terribleness of media on the internet for a very long time, but I also, I don't want to spend a huge amount of time ranting, because I also haven't participated in many of the conversations around like, how do we change this? Like I have sort of an idea, but I also haven't spent a huge amount of time trying to work out a solution. What I do know is that the solutions that I see out there, they're not really hitting it. And I think it's okay to try. Like they're asking the right questions and they're aware of the right problems. But I guess I just tend to think that people lambast the media quite heavily and are like, well, crypto could solve this or this could solve this, without, I don't think they really understand like how media functions under the surface. And so the crypto media, or crypto media solutions that I've seen were all sort of about like paying people for their content, which seem to have the same effect in crypto. It seemed to have the same effect. So like, again, I don't want to be hard on any of these platforms like specifically, but like Steam, or even I think Minds was one of them as well, are these platforms that are, again, think that media is messed up, and it is. But what happened was, there were certain niches within the Steam community that would obviously get you better tips, right?
Yeah.
Was obviously crypto. Like if you can write a pumpy crypto piece, people would tip you very well. And so you see the recreation of the echo chamber just like we have now. And so I just feel like none of them are really hitting the nail on the head necessarily.
Okay. That's interesting. So I was wondering, because you know so many cool projects and you've been in the space for so long, if there were any that you really liked, or anything that you thought was like, or there was, even if it hasn't existed yet, there's like an approach or an idea or something like that that's like really caught your imagination. Not yet.
Yeah, like not really.
Not yet.
Honestly.
Yeah. Interesting.
And I sort of hate to say that, but I guess one thing that to turn that into a positive, one thing that I would say is the idea of you getting paid from your community. So like a Patreon or a Substack, I do believe is a nice model. I think that it might take some years for that to fully take hold. But what a lot of people, I think, forget about that model is that you need to focus on your, like, I can't remember if it's 100 or 1,000, but there's this like sort of theory that you have like 100 true followers or 1,000 true followers. And I think you really do have to cultivate that community if you're going to go that route.
Yeah.
And that is.
And I remember what I was going to say about that, which is that you have to cultivate that community on platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, where if you're talking about something that they don't approve of, you could immediately lose all of that work that you've done. And so I think that there's just like an incredibly precarious position that artists, especially those that are on the edge like you are, find themselves in terms of like balancing all of those competing issues. And I think that is the true promise of blockchain, crypto, whatever you want to say, is that self-sovereignty. But that takes us to the problem of, okay, but are we really talking about like restructuring the entire internet here? And is that a realistic goal?
Right. Yeah. So this is why I have probably yet to sort of jump into some of the crypto media solution platforms and like really take a strong stance. Again, I think they're asking the right questions. They know there's a problem. We're trying to figure out the solution. But I think the problem is deeper than many people. Well, they might even know that it's deeper, but until you fix that deeper thing, you're not going to fix the top layer thing. Or it's just sort of like, it's almost how Bitcoin and crypto people used to talk about the financial system back in the early days. It's like, we've just been putting band-aids on the financial system forever, and we aren't actually fixing the core issues. So that's why we need Bitcoin, right? Or that's why we need X cryptocurrency. And so it's the same sort of scenario. This feels more like a band-aid than something that's getting to the root of the problem. And like, when I start thinking about the root of the problem, it really gets insane, where it's just like, nope, we're fucked. Like it's all over for us now, because sort of like root of problem is like manufactured controversy in the media. But manufactured controversy in the media is the only thing that gets clicks. So have to manufacture controversy in the media so that we can survive. And it's like a human problem, right? Where we like controversy, and you know, how do I change billions of humans? I don't, right? It's just sort of how it is.
Right. It's like, I just feel like everything that we've been talking about in terms of the legacy institutions and in terms of what the new freelancers are facing in terms of trying to get content out is coming to a head in more and more and more ways. You know, we're seeing it all of the time, and in just all kinds of different ways. You know, the end of publications, or the mass shrinking of publications that were one time, you know, well respected or massive and growing, you know, and we're just seeing the ad model, the ad bubble, if you will, pop. I read this amazing book called Subprime Attention Crisis that's about how the advertising industry, that's like basically the entire economy of the internet, is similar to what precipitated the great financial collapse of 2008. And so I think that like that could ultimately be what pushes this issue up somehow. You know, I don't know how it's going to play out, obviously, like it's going to be chaos, but it's coming to a head. And then it's a matter of like, how will that change happen? Right. You know, because I think we will have to change aspects of the infrastructure that most people don't really even need to know about.
Yeah.
For the average user. And yet the amount of work involved in changing the existing systems over is massive. And so a lot of people will have to be involved in making that change happen.
Yeah, I would definitely agree there. I do think these things are coming to a head, and the sort of model where people are paying for their content, I think, is one that we will start seeing. I think it's been sort of an uphill battle because media was free initially. But so I guess like some of the crypto stuff that's happening now, in terms of you have your browser wallet or some sort of wallet that's connected to a publication, and then you don't have to, you know, you just read the articles, and then like you get to, and then the money comes out of your wallet, or the crypto comes out of your wallet, instead of, hey, do you want to pay 3 cents for this every time you click on an article? Right. So if we can get that sort of connection where it's, you know, I just raged against abstraction of systems, but where that is abstracted, where that's abstracted from people, so that they don't have to be like, okay, yeah, like every time I click, I need to pay 3 cents. It just sort of, they know that there's a flow of money that's coming out at a certain time. I think that'd be pretty good. And I think you'd start to get people to pay for content, and to be aware like what content should be paid for. Just because like what you were talking about in terms of the like investigative pieces, you know, those pieces take years to write sometimes. I think Lee Quinn had this really great article on her Substack. I think Balaji maybe commissioned her to do it, but you know, where she's talking about getting $250 for this piece that took her like, you know, months and months to research, and you have to be on the ground for those things a lot of the time, which means you paid for a flight, you're paying for accommodations, translators maybe, and like, you know, $250, that's silly. Like, that's crazy that we cannot pay the people who are really doing serious journalism better than that. Because then you'll see, you know, well, I can even use myself an example. Like, I don't really write investigative stuff so much. I write these like columns where I have a lot of voice and tone because I've been in the industry so long, and I'm just like, that's dumb and that's great, you know, and I get paid well for those. And I'm just like, you know, other people who are doing real on the ground research should probably get more than I get paid for just being able to spout off at the mouth about the industry. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think this has been great. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to?
I guess, so one other thing that I would mention is a model that we just tried out at Consensus. And I think this, Decrypt is also doing something in this space. So we launched our own token, our own crypto token. It's an ERC20 token, but it rides on a test network. So please, if you're listening to this, do not pay money for this token. It's called Desk Token. And I think this is a really interesting model as well, because it's just sort of a rewards mechanism for people who are at Consensus or at CoinDesk. So right now it was just an experiment at Consensus. And what we did is to sort of incentivize people to watch sessions and engage with sessions. We did airdrops of this token inside the chat. So they could just click on a claim link, they could get some desk tokens, and then we built out an NFT gallery or NFT marketplace where they could use those desk tokens to acquire NFTs. Some of those NFTs were like collectibles, some were like utility-based NFTs or like experience-based NFTs. So I made one where if you're the NFT holder, you can get a custom limerick piece of poetry from myself. And so it was just inside CoinDesk, we came up with this idea for different NFTs that we would, well, I'm not supposed to say sell, but acquire. They would acquire. And I honestly, I was so surprised at the insane amount of attention Desk got during the conference. People were ate up with it. They like created their own Discord channel. I made a joke that they were acting like piranhas. And so they happily took on that name, and they've become like their own community of people who are really interested in like building Desk. And also because they want more Desk, they want to help Consensus and CoinDesk like build their platform as well. And that's like super fascinating if you can get a community of people to help you help yourself. It's something that is valueless, like zero value. And Decrypt, I think, is doing a similar thing. I don't have specific insight there, but on their mobile app, if you read stories, you get some of their token, and then you can use that token in their store for, I think, swag or some other stuff. And so that's like a pretty cool model that I see some of the crypto publications testing out, that I think, you know, I don't know that they've, you know, made money on it yet, but you can start to see how you could, how that could be a new model.
Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting. Yeah, well, it'll be fun to see what happens with Desk, if they'll keep it going, or, you know, like how that will.
I think that's the plan. I've sort of become sort of a cult of personality in the Discord. And so I know they, you know, the community was just like, oh, we should write a white paper. And I'm all, what? Like, why would you want to write the white paper? It's like the CoinDesk thing. And so I, you know, I'm obviously pushing all those thoughts to the CoinDesk people as well, because they should, you know, CoinDesk should get all their departments together and think about how they want to utilize this testnet token to engage people, you know, whether it's reading articles or listening to the podcasts or at our later events and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because it's really about the engagement and the attention, because everything's so weird on the internet right now that like that's really the biggest value you can get in some ways, is to build that connection with your fans, like you were talking about. I don't remember if it's 100 fans or 1,000 fans either. I kind of think it's 1,000, but I don't Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is.
Yeah.
1,000 seems like a lot though.
It does. It does. So, we'll have to look that one up. So,
Yeah.
what are you excited for in the future of crypto? Like this coming year, next year, like what are you looking forward to?
A bear market so that I can sit down a little bit. But
I just have to say that's the best comment. I think that it's really the people, like I like the bear markets better too, because it's when you get to get work done and move the ball forward in a way, because it's when the only people that are hanging out are the people that genuinely care and understand and are there for the right reasons.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
But like serious answer, I mean, I'm looking forward to being able to build out more experiences where I'm getting more people hands-on with the tech. So in 2017, every time I would go out on a date or go out, I would hear people talking about crypto. In my personal opinion, a lot of them were talking about the wrong cryptos, but that's, neither here nor there.
Sure.
Everybody sort of has to, that's what's great about this industry too. You get to sort of learn for yourself. So you see, once you start buying crypto, it becomes a bit like gambling, where you're just like obsessed with it and watching it all the time. And then you make it through a bear market and come out on the other side, sort of having learned from that experience. But I see sort of the same things now, even though the price has kind of flattened out a bit. I'm still hearing like lots of people out and about talking about it. And so I am very interested in making sure that people understand how to actually play with the technology and not just like buy some Bitcoin on Coinbase. That's like a fine step to take, but I want them to actually be like serious crypto users that are functioning with the protocol itself, which is another great thing that we did with Desk, because it taught a lot of people how to interact with an ERC20 token and NFTs. And that was like full crypto. We didn't have sort of the centralized party that was managing that. And so that was I thought that was really impressive.
That's cool.
Because people started really learning how to do this. I mean, I've gone down a full-on DeFi rabbit hole. And so I'm super excited to start playing with all the DeFi protocols and like figuring out how I create new workshops to teach people how to earn 40% yield on their crypto locked up or something.
Yeah. Awesome. That sounds really cool. I look forward to seeing those.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Bailey. This is so fun.
Yeah, this is awesome. I had so much fun talking about it. And like I said, you flattered me. So I'm leaving this feeling really good.
Well, good. That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.